Saturday, October the 9th, 1982, Minyan Seret.
Thank you very much. I want to read a quotation to you which appeared in the New York Times of Thursday, August the 5th. You know the Hasidic story of the Chassid who rushed into the Rabbi to complain that one of the Hasidim was changing the wheel of the wagon which had broken while he was davening to save time. And the Rebbe said, "Isn't that wonderful? How wonderful Jews are. Even when they change the wheels of their wagons, they daven." So even while I was sunbathing somewhere on Thursday, August the 5th, I don't remember where I was, reading the New York Times, I thought of you, my beloved congregation, and I cut out this unlikely extract from the Times to read to you. I didn't know I was going to use it today, but I knew I was going to use it, and it fits in, I think, with today, as we shall see, if you can be patient enough for me to read it. It's a fairly lengthy quotation, and I'm going to have to read it all, because without it, it won't have any significance. And as I say, it's on an unlikely subject. It's about the music of Mozart. Now, I don't know whether anybody here saw the new Metropolitan Opera production of Così fan tutte, which was the Colin Graham production. If anybody did see that production, would they please raise their hand? You did. All right. Anybody else? Okay, we have two people who actually saw the performance. So you can, I did not see the performance, but it doesn't really matter. You didn't have to see the performance. As you will see, I want you to listen to this quotation. It is not specifically about Mozart. It is about other things too. It raises questions which are at the heart of what we Jews do at this time of the year. And so although it would be nice if you'd seen it, it really doesn't matter, because the theme will be apparent to all of you. The author is a man called Edward Rothstein, who writes from time to time on music. Mozart, recently, I believe I saw a bibliography, a new biography came out, which received very bad reviews in the New York Times, whatever that means. And of course, many of you will have seen Amadeus, which is a sort of a version of Mozart's life, based on some kind of a quarrel which took place between him and some... Can you all hear, by the way? Can you all hear? You come forward a little. There is a moment in Mozart's opera Così fan tutte that keeps coming to mind during these summer months. It is the moment of revelation at the very end of the opera. After the lovers have played their parts in Don Alonso's drama. Now, I don't remember this opera very well. I haven't seen it, as a matter of fact. The last time I saw this was a concert performance in Oxford, England, about, never mind how long ago. But basically, if I remember correctly, and those of you who saw it and who are more au courant with it will remind me, it starts with, it's rather stylized to begin with. It reminds me very much of those Shakespearean plays where somebody on the left-hand side of the stage throws down a gauntlet, and somebody on the right-hand side of the stage throws down the gauntlet. Somebody on the left-hand side of the stage gets broigers, and somebody on the right-hand side of the stage gets broigers. You have a kind of there is a geometrical symmetry about it to begin with. At any rate, there are two couples very much in love with each other. I don't mean the couples are in love with each other. That might be a connotation that would probably run better in Scarsdale than here. The individual members of the couples are in love with each other. And Don Alonso, who is somewhat cynical, goes about trying to demonstrate to the men, at least, that the women's love, however serious it is or sincere, can be perverted very easily if they dress up as other attractive men and try to persuade the women to fall out of love with the originals and fall in love with the seconds. You all have the picture. It's a very unique and original theme. The philosopher has persuaded the men to test their lovers' sworn fidelity. As a result, the two men have seen their lovers ready to marry other men after just a few days of earnest wooing. In other words, all the protestations that had gone on before just disappear in the wind after a few days of hard work on the part of the same men dressed up as different men. The two women have seen their lovers deceive and manipulate their deepest feelings. There can be no illusions left. One reason why this moment returns to the mind of a summertime music listener is that during this season, and increasingly during the rest of the year, we associate Mozart not with Don Alonso and his hard-nosed views on love, with the starry-eyed lovers full of charm and innocence, before Alonso has had a chance to work his wiles. We have turned Mozart into an idealist, a graceful visitor from elevated climes, bright and beautiful, untainted by sweaty air or skepticism. The popular, mostly Mozart festival at Lincoln Center partly survives on this summertime illusion. In fact, our Mozart performances throughout the year mostly retain the same image. Most modern Mozart performances are pristine and bright, free from ambiguity, sad in slow movements, but avoiding anything cynical, earthy, or disturbing. We elevate Mozart to otherworldly purity and divorce his high-born music from the man and from the everyday, turning his music into a timeless revelation of transcendent realms. At worst, and there are all too many bad Mozart performances, the music becomes mere patter, easy listening, unworldly and untroubling. It provides a comforting nonchalance. But Mozart was far more challenging. He was closer to Don Alonso than to a child god or an innocent. One danger of the Mostly Mozart Festival is that while it repeats music and performers in a grandly successful marketing package, it will give us a Mozart who is little more than a light comforter in the summer heat. In contrast with summertime Mozart, the achievements of the new Metropolitan Opera Così fan tutte last season ought to be reconsidered. That production by Colin Graham is likely to grow in stature with age. It reveals subtleties that are present throughout the composer's music. Mr. Graham and the set designer Hayden Griffith made it clear that this School for Lovers, as the subtitle has it, is based on convention and artifice. The proscenium was covered by a picture frame. The scenery, far from being naturalistic, was created by slats of wood, visibly moved and turned to create different settings. The lighting was bright, as artificial as the water and the boat near the horizon. The townspeople doubled as stagehands, dressed in 18th century costume. Rooms were decorated with enormous green leaves or large flowers. The slats were merely folded back or slid to the side to create an outdoor setting. The garden they formed, curiously enough, the garden had a door. The settings, in fact, suggested an 18th century aesthetic in which nature was most beautiful when most cultivated, when gardens were extensions of indoor art. Nature and culture were intermingled, with the emphasis on culture's refined achievements. Throughout the staging, the emphasis on artifice was the same. There was no doubt that these people had real feelings, but they were also figures in a comedy, with Alonso as playwright. "The performance is charming," he exclaimed. "It took only costumes and whiskers to change a man." Lovers' partings were cliché-ridden set pieces. The production preserved this delicate state of affairs, erring only occasionally as when a man broke the dance of manners with a too blatant hand placed upon a lover's breast. By the end of the opera, the lesson of the lovers was perfectly suited to the refined mixture of nature and artifice throughout. The opera doesn't show that lovers are not faithful. Rather, what the opera teaches is that love is as much a cultivated drama as an expression of natural passion. Love is a staged relation, as the young pastoral figures in Bastien and Bastienne learn from the aged shepherd in the opera that Mozart wrote when he was only 12 years old. The Met nearly disrupted that insight by having the lovers switch partners at the last minute. That switch implied that because love is artifice, it hardly matters who one's partner is. But the opera is more profound. It does matter whom one loves, but such love is not simple. It is a construction of culture as much as of nature, of artifice as much as of passion. This view of love, far from being cynical, reveals the ambiguities and piquant sorrow that lies at its heart. If performances of Mozart today are so often unsatisfactory, it is partly because we do not recognize that much of the music teaches the same lessons as the Così. It is not. Mozart music is not innocent or charming or otherworldly. It is a dance a celebration of formal gestures, full of formulas, familiar turns and twists. These are similar to the gracious and elegantly dramatic conventions of other music of the era. But this music also seems to know, as Don Alonso knows, that these motions are not inevitable facts of nature, but merely conventions. The music recognizes its own artifice, playing it without rejecting it. At the moment when the artifice of the music is disclosed, when a sequence of patter comes to a haunting modulation, when a melody remains suspended before its resolution, when a rondo theme returns after a fantastical cadenza, at such a moment something is also revealed of deeper matters, as to the lovers in Così. This is the way things are, Mozart music says. The world of convention is our only world. Nature cannot exist raw or in itself, an ideal unmediated by the artifice of culture. We live, to invoke a German philosopher of the same period, in a Kantian universe. Immanuel Kant, of course, was a famous German philosopher who based his philosophical theory in large part on the understanding, which is at the base of this article, that we cannot see reality as it is. He referred to this as the Ding an sich. We cannot see the thing in itself. What we experience is already refracted to us through certain categories. It is as if, this is not a good example, but it'll serve. It is as if we are born with rose-colored spectacles on, if you will, when we are born into a particular culture, and we are never, ever able to remove those spectacles, because the very fact that we are born into a certain culture entails that we experience reality through those spectacles. We never can see the Ding an sich. We can never see reality itself in all its rawness and all its nakedness. We live in a Kantian universe. In terms of this article, we only can survive if we hold fast to our formal gestures and our conventions. Later Romantic music strove to reach that ideal state of nature that Mozart knew to be inaccessible. The Romantics wanted to discard all artifice. The Romantics wanted to choose sincerity, truth, self-expression. If I may add a little bit of Rashi, this desire to discard all artifice has been pushed to incredible extremes in recent years, especially in France, where novelists write in such a way as to attempt to exclude all convention or artifice from what they write. When Zola wrote a novel and mentioned a gun standing, a rifle standing in the corner, we knew that sooner or later the gun was going to be used by somebody. But when Alain Robbe-Grillet writes a novel, he will mention a gun and a table and a cup and a plate and a saucer and a knife and a man, and all of them are mentioned with the same equidistance and the same neutrality, almost as if to say, avoid trying to interpret or understand through convention. Try to see things as they are, without interpretation, without any subjective projection. Try to see nature as it is before we've got our clammy little interpretive fingers on it. Mont Blanc, Robbe-Grillet said, wasn't waiting for us since the tertiary era, he's talking about the glacial periods millions and billions of years ago, in order to give us our sense of innocence and purity. Mozart had a deeper understanding of how art and convention inextricably shape the world. His music is not otherworldly. It is continually exploring the crevices and the connections between culture and nature. There is tragedy, but also a good deal of pleasure in Mozart's musical revelations of the way we live amid our conventions. And these conventions are always unnecessary, yet always needed. Such recognition permits a certain attitude celebrated at the end of Così, knowing laughter. That knowing laughter is precisely what we need more of in our Mozart performances, and perhaps elsewhere as well. I like that last little throwaway. It sounded like, and also much cattle. Let me go straight to Rashi, because I can see that some of our visitors this morning think they have fallen upon the new school on West 86th Street by accident. Here is Rashi's comment on Atzeret Tihiyeh, la Atzeret. Shivat Yamim Takivu Adonai, Bayom Hashmini, on the 8th day, which is today Shmini Atzeret, Mikra Kodesh Yelachem, Vikrate Meshel Adonai, Atzeret. It is an Atzeret. Ye shall do no manner of servile work. What does Atzeret mean? Atzeret literally means to stop, to withhold, to restrain. When in the Bible the matriarchs are unable to procreate, it is said that God has closed their wombs. They are bunged up. They can't produce. And the verb that is used is ayin tzadi resh, atzar. So atzeret has a sense of withholding. And this sense of withholding may go back to the earliest, most primitive days, before, in fact, Judaism in any form or shape existed. The notion that these festival days have a malevolent aspect and therefore have to be on some level days when one withholds oneself from doing certain things, refrains from doing certain things. I'm thinking particularly of the way in which the Sabbath, for example, the seventh day, was celebrated by the Mesopotamian kings. They weren't allowed to move or leave their homes. It was regarded as a day of bad luck. And any action taken by the leader of the people would involve doom and all kinds of horrible circumstances on those who were members of the people. Jewish religion, of course, transformed Shabbat and Yom Tov from being days of doom and gloom, and yet some of the overtone still remains. What does Atzeret mean? It's remarkable, this comment by Rashi, who is our best-known 11th century commentator, because it is based on a Talmudic quotation in Masechet Sukkah, but it's not quite what the Masechet Sukkah quotation says. There's no purpose in comparing them. It would only add to the time and wouldn't illuminate anything. But it's unusual that Rashi has elaborated, which he rarely does. Rashi usually faithfully renders what the Midrash says about a particular biblical text, but here he has gone beyond the Midrash. Atzarti etchem etzli. I have held you back. I have clung to you. I have insisted that you remain in my arms. I have held you to me. Kemelech, like a king, shezimein et banav lisu'udah, who invited his children to a meal, to a party, to a simcha. Lakach v'chach yamim, for a certain number of days. Kevan shehigia zemanan lipater, when the time came for the junketing to stop. Amar, the king said, Banai, my children, bevakasha mikem, I beg you, ikvu imi od yom echad, just one more for the road. Stay one more day. Let's have one more round of feasting and jollification. Kasha alai pridatchem. Your leaving me is so hard for me. The word prida, of course, means separation. Separation is hard for me, the king says. So what else is new? I think perhaps all peoples have problems with separation, but Jews more so. In respect of separation, Jews are like all people except more so. You know, parents often wonder why before their children go to college, the last few months are hell's kitchen in the home. One of the reasons, of course, is that the children have to demonstrate to themselves that home is bad because they have to leave home. They don't really want to leave home, but don't tell them. It's a fatal error to try to explain what's going on. They don't want to leave home, and therefore, in order to be able to leave home, they have to get their parents to fly into such furies so that they can demonstrate to anybody who wishes to behold that home is hell and therefore is worthy to be left. And the separation, the prida, becomes easier. And as for the significance of this story, Rashi, who, like all good rabbis, was a family man, I cannot believe that even under the rubric of medieval French Orthodox Judaism, that a family who had been with the father or the grandfather, with the children, with the Pampers and the diapers and the Johnson's baby powder and all the tensions that generally build up as a group of members of one family stay in place as if anybody ever had a wedding or a bar mitzvah. Sometimes the broigus starts before the invitations have gone out. Often families cease to speak to each other, or brothers and sisters cease to speak for 50 or 60 years because a postage stamp was at an angle which offended. The postal stamp on the invitation was not perpendicular. So, and certainly anybody who has kept their eyes and ears open at weddings know how these are hotbeds of family dissension. One of the reasons that we break a glass at a Jewish wedding is to forestall other glasses being broken deliberately. It is an attempt at mastery over the horrors which rise out of anything that is joyous. Is to say and one does not have to believe in the devil as such, one only has to believe in the diabolical. Satan is simply a symbol for an external representation, even as the lady slowly oxidizing in New York Harbor is a representation of liberty, so also Satan, or the devil, is simply a symbol of the diabolical quality, which is why there are so many curious rituals associated with marriage and funerals and death. Now, Rashi he was naive, the fact of the matter is, but I don't think he could have been so naive to believe that what the king was saying, and the king is God, let's have one more day. The best way to terminate family arrangements like this is to get out without anybody knowing that you're getting out, and then it's too late to have the latest recriminations. In other words, where's Moshe gone? Oh, he left? Oh, thank God for that. Oh, we could have had another fight. At any rate, most things have been resolved by the time the people slip out. No, I think Rashi is after something much closer to what Edward Rothstein was writing about in the New York Times on August the 5th. Rashi is reminding us that all these mitzvot, all these traditions which we Jews have inherited from the past, have a crucial importance all on their own, regardless of the sanction whence they derive. It matters little whether these mitzvot are the fiat of an eternal God who created the world and chose the Jewish people, which we are given to believe is the view maintained by our more traditional brethren, or, as in a Reconstructionist context, we believe these mitzvot, for the most part, to be folkways evolved and developed by the Jewish people as behavior patterns over century upon century to confer meaning and dignity and holiness and sacredness upon Jewish life. It matters little, I say, whence the origin of these traditions. If Rashi and Edward Rothstein are to be believed, I wonder how Edward Rothstein and indeed Rashi would feel about being coupled with each other. The nature of the game is that these are artifices and convention. The king knows that after spending a certain number of days with your parents, especially when you are married, something is bound to happen. I couldn't sleep last night. In the middle of the night, I flicked my television on, that beautiful television which the congregation bought me, which now sits in my bedroom. It's all your fault. I didn't have color television before this year, and now you've spoiled me. And there was a movie which I just caught a snippet of because I decided that the best thing to do was to have a cup of tea and turn over, was I Never Sang for My Father, which when I saw it the first time round reduced me to absolute paroxysms of tears. My wife had to send for an ambulance to send me home. Did anybody see I Never Sang for My Father? I mean, it is so true to life. The father who, when his son drives up, the son is about 60 years old, but the father still has to tell him how to back out of the drive because he knows he's going to knock the tree down. Now, something like that is bound to happen. No matter what, no matter how many good resolutions are made. You see, that is why Yontif itself is so problematic. We talk about the great festivals as being the time when Jews get together in their families. Does anybody know how dangerously, potentially dangerous this sort of situation is? We talk about the family get together on the Seder. I know plenty of Jews for whom Friday night is fraught with all kinds of familial tension. The reason being that during the week we resolve our interpersonal relationships with our families by having something else to do. But on Friday night, all those roles disappear. All we have to do is to be a family, and that's the problem. All the weight is brought to bear on the family relationship, and tensions fly high. The slightest provocation, the slightest looking in the wrong direction, even if the chicken soup is a quarter of an inch higher in one bowl than in another, can be a casus belli, which can last until the next Friday night. What Rashi and Edward Rothstein are both telling us is that one cannot tell the whole truth and nothing but the truth, not even some of the time. And if Mozart was speaking of the love of man for woman, and if Rothstein is telling us that even when men and women, and since we're living in 1982, I should add men and women fall in love with each other and believe that they have the most ideal relationship, Mozart tells us the only way this kind of relationship can survive is if only part of the truth is told. And that part which is not told must be metamorphosed into convention and artifice. No love relationship can survive Darling, I really have to tell you like it is. No way. Please don't even try. Many a marriage which began in the vain belief that the underlying latencies of human relationships could be delved into, founded on rocks before the 12th month had passed. Leave those inner dynamics for the shrinks. Let us rather live on the manifest level of convention and artifice, knowing laughter. We Reconstructionists speak of natural religion as opposed to supernatural religion, but it is a terrible misnomer. There is no such thing as natural religion. Nature is awful. Nature is something we have to protect ourselves from. That is why the gardens and the props in this performance of Così fan tutte attracted Edward Rothstein's attention, because it understood only too well how raw and savage nature is in the raw, and how we have to protect ourselves by convention. And of course, this not only relates to the love between man and woman and man and woman and woman. Otherwise, I would not have disturbed your Sabbath and Yom Tov morning peace with it. It crucially applies to our relationship with God. If we want to love God, if we want to believe in God, if we want God to love us, if we want to have a relationship with God, may I humbly suggest that we don't tell God all the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth. That is to say, may I suggest that we don't tell God what a rotten mess he made of this world, what a poor, miserable creature man is, how the remarkable thing is that by artifice and accident more than anything else, most of us manage to schlep through life more or less and survive both our family associations and our larger communal associations. Some of you look a little surprised, as if a rabbi shouldn't be saying such a thing. After all, who should we not say the truth to if not to God? After all, on the Day of Atonement, we read all those lovely prayers in which God is the one who searches the hearts and the reins. God knows everything about us. But you see, that works both ways. We also know just about everything about God, and what an idiot he is, and what a fool he is, and what a mess he made of the world. It's interesting that Edward Rothstein and Rashi might both agree on the reading for the intermediate Sabbath of Sukkot, which is the book of Kohelet, the book of Ecclesiastes, which gets as close as possible to saying to God, God, you're just full of it. The race is not to the swift, the righteous man dies a painful death, and the wicked man gets away with murder. The book of Ecclesiastes, if you want to put it in one sentence, says to God, God, forget it. We know where you're at. We're just being nice to you. We're not telling it to you. And if you're surprised that a rabbi is saying this, I've reminded you that the book of Ecclesiastes says the same thing. But more crucially, and this is an insight for which I am greatly indebted to my colleague Richard Rubenstein, what a sad comment on the world that God created is the rabbinic notion of life after death, which after all said and done doesn't exist in the Bible. My ancestors, your ancestors, the rabbis of old, were so disgusted with God, they thought he had made such a lousy job of this universe, that they had to create a whole new world and a whole eschatological doctrine to try to create a kind of perspective from which the wrongs of this world might at least be seen in some kind of perspective, so that the righteous man who suffers intolerably in this world at least is rewarded in the next world. But if this world was sui generis, if this world could be satisfied naturally, there would have been no need for eschatology. The very existence of a concept of life after death is an indictment of this world, the world which God created in 6 days. Do you all understand that point? Do you all get that point? The rabbinic doctrine of life after death is an indictment of the traditional God. It says to him, the world you created is sick. It's pathological. And we have to protect you, dear God, because we wouldn't want to sell this package to the world. We are suggesting that in the beginning, not only did you create this world, which is totally unbelievable. I mean, you've got to believe this is a joke. We have said, and we hope you won't let us down, that there is another world where those who suffer and are righteous are rewarded. I mean, listen to what the rabbis say. The rabbis say, have you ever seen a wicked man prospering? You know why a wicked man prospers? Because everybody, no matter how wicked, must have done at least one good during his lifetime. Now you see how much this man is being rewarded. That should show you how much God rewards a good deed. The wicked man is being paid off in this world so that by the time he dies, there'll be no righteousness left to him. His credit will have been completely wiped out, and he can go to purgatory and suffer for an eternity. Righteous people, all of them must have committed, in other words, wicked people must have done some good. Every righteous person must have done something bad. Why is this righteous person suffering so much? Because God is paying him off for the few misdeeds that he committed. He must have done something bad, you see. And can you see how much he's suffering? This should be an indication to you how much the wicked are going to suffer in the next world. I'd rather have the balancing of accounts done in this world. I have no belief in the next world. I only know what happens in this world. Some have it good and some have it terrible. And of course we Reconstructionists know that the conception of God that we created simply is a hypothesis. It doesn't serve any other purpose than to express an attitude of mind of what the people were thinking. And so one of the lessons which Shmini Atzeret tells us is, if we Jews want a relationship with ourselves and with God and with each other and with our families, learn the lesson of Kosif Antute. Yes, it doesn't take too much to make people give it their ideals. Just about everybody has a price on just about everything. It doesn't take too much to have a man or a woman switch if something apparently better comes along. But let not that be a source of discord. Let not that be a source of shame or guilt or reproach. Life is built like this. There is no such thing as a naturalistic life. Life is artifice. Life is stylized. Religion is, there is no such thing as a natural religion. Natural in the sense as opposed to supernatural. But everything that is religious is stylized. Eulogies are stylized. Wedding sermons are stylized. Religious services are stylized. Rabbis couldn't tell congregations what they really feel about them, nor could congregants tell rabbis what they really feel about them, else the world would dissolve in short order. We all need to go through some game of make-believe. Now, I will agree that there are degrees, there's a spectrum. But the closer one gets to the spectrum of those well-meaning, hearty people who say, I always call a spade, I always let it hang out, I always tell it like it is, tread softly, for you are approaching pathways to doom. Shmini Atzeret, in rabbinic tradition, tells the story of a king who wanted his children to stay for one more day. Look, we've had Slichot, we've had Shabbat Shuvah, we've had 2 days of Rosh Hashanah, we've had 10 days of repentance, we've had Tzom Gedalia, we've had 7 days of Sukkot. Did anybody really believe that God needed one more Yontif to say goodbye to the Jewish people? It's ridiculous. In the very exaggeration, we have the solution to our problem. The stylization. You may not want to see your relatives. Do me a favor, once every so often, I'm not going to tell you how often, invite them all over for dinner. You don't like it? So go and have a few drinks in the kitchen before they come. Or if you want further advice on how to relax, come to see me after the service. But have it, do it, meet with them. Have that experience. Those who are tied to us by these bonds of love, kith and kin, are at once the most problematic for us, but the ones without whose dialectic with us, we will never be able fully to reach out to other human beings. This naive myth on the part of most of our adolescents who believe that they can slam the ancestral home and go away and create an entirely new world and then bring back some girl exactly like Mama the next week, it tells a lie all the time. But we have to wait a long time before our young people grow up to be able to understand this. We have to understand. And that, of course, makes these mitzvot, these observances, these gettings together of even greater importance. Voltaire once said, if God didn't exist, we would have to create him. I'm saying if the mitzvot were not given by God, we would have had to create them ourselves, which in fact, Rabbi Kaplan said, we in fact did. Neil, do you want to ask a question? Yes.
And which is different from the way the rest of the holidays are.
No, if you look back, you'll see Yom Kippur, also Shabbat, Shabbaton, Hu Lachem. Lachem is repeated throughout the chapter. I don't think we can build anything on that. However, when you asked a question, I assumed you were going to say something else. And so I'm going to deal with what I assumed you were going to say. I thought you were going to say, this is not what you were going to say, but you see, I often find, this is what the Rabbinic Judaism believes, that you can't study without chevrusa. You have to have somebody else to spin something off. I find that even if somebody asks me a question which is miles away from where I am, they very often formulate a question which isn't yet in my mind. What I thought you were going to say was, how can you say that this is the case, that the king is really already on tenterhooks? He can't wait for the kids to get away so that the apartment can be tidied up and all the diapers removed and all the toys from the floor and the Atari put away and the noise. And you can sit down quietly and just get your act together again after all this simus, all this upheaval. I thought the question you were going to ask was, how is it that in connection with the festival of Sukkot and Shmini Atzeret, the word simcha occurs all the time? You must rejoice. Well, of course, if you have to rejoice, you've got to rejoice. Be happy. You better be happy. In other words, it gives the game away. You don't have to tell people to be happy if they're really rejoicing. You only tell people to be happy or if there's a danger that something else might take place. Sukkot and Shmini Atzeret is a very problematic time. The barns are full. That's precisely the time when we are most fearful of hunger, which is why we fast. The harvest has been good, yet the rains are coming. And don't we have a wonderful cantor? Other cantors have to pray for rain before it comes. All our cantor had to do was to put his kittle on the chair last night, and it rained all night. You should appreciate these things. In other words, methinks the lady protesteth too much. Why are we commanded to rejoice? Because this is the time of the year when we look at ourselves, we look at our parents, we look at our brothers and sisters, we look at our children, and we say to ourselves, what's it all about? The whole thing is epiphenomenal. It's all about evolution. All we're doing is reproducing, like ants, like fleas, like animals. What nature wants of us is to reproduce. All the other stuff is fantasies that we build up on these. Epiphenomenal. It's not where the real action is. The real action is be fruitful and multiply. The garden, the nature doesn't care anything about anything else. Jewish tradition says, Vayita ach sameach, rejoice, be happy. Be aware and be cognizant of the frightening thought that maybe it doesn't add up to a row of beans. Be aware of the thought expressed immortally by Solomon, according to Jewish tradition, Havel Havalim Amar Kohelet. Havel Havalim Hakol Hevel. It's all vanity. Vanity of vanity, said the preacher. This is the book that we read on Sukkot. Vanity of vanity, said the preacher. Vanity of vanities. All is vanity. Say that. Acknowledge it. Be aware, like Don Alonso, of what can go on if you buy a man a mustache and ask him to change his suit. But also remember the absolute imperative of V'hayita ach sameach. Knowing laughter, knowing religion, is the only way I can see that we're going to survive. Of course, you might say that they survive very well elsewhere. I'm not sure. Listen very carefully when other Jews talk. Sometimes this repetition of how wonderful it is, how positive everything is, how solid everything is overdone, like V'hayita ach sameach. Jewish tradition has left us a marvelous balance at this time of the year between looking into the abyss, looking into the cosmic Ding an sich and saying, it's all useless, it's all vanity, and saying, but yet we are human beings, and in us, as members of our groups, we have developed certain stylizations, certain artifices, certain conventions. If we live according to these and transmit them to generations to come, human beings will be able to live without denying the reality, but making the best of what we have, which is a pretty good agenda for any kind of religion, it seems to me. So, my dear friends, I hope you will all come and join with us this evening at 7 o'clock in the rejoicing over the Torah. This is our Torah. We symbolically do tonight what the ancient Babylonians did when they celebrated their New Year. They read their myth out from beginning to end, the Enuma Elish was recited from beginning to end. We Jews tend to read our myth over an entire year, not just over the celebration. But symbolically, we end the Torah tonight and we begin it again as if to indicate this is why we are Jews. This is our convention. This is our stylization. This is our artifice. This is what we have created to prevent ourselves from indulging in that kind of pessimism and gloom, which is of such a high order that people don't even want to procreate and allow nature to continue. V'hayita ach sameach. This is a special kind of rejoicing. It's a religious kind of rejoicing. It's what we call in Yiddish being freilich. It's not something that is contingent upon whether you personally feel happy or not. I'm not asking you whether you feel happy today, and that whether or not you feel happy today will determine whether you should come to Simchat Torah tonight. That's not the happiness we're talking about. We all, as Jews, must get together tonight and be happy in a conventional way. And then, perhaps, if and when we are happy on a personal level again, we will understand that that kind of happiness ultimately is bound up with being part of a people who knows how to rejoice and how to mourn conventionally. We rise for Aleinu on page 382.